Hello, I'm Ollie, and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, musical theatre. I'm doing the Give My Regards to Broadway tag. So this is a tag created by fellow booktuber Troy Tradap. If you don't know what a tag is basically a series of questions. We share them around on BookTube. We answer each other's questions, and it just gives a bit more insight into people's reading and how people feel about books. And what I'm trying to do with this one, and indeed I think we'll try and do going forward, is talk about books that I haven't really talked about on the channel when I do these. So it's easy to kind of fall back on the old standards, books I really love and talk about a lot when answering questions like these. But what I'm going to try and do going forward, as I say, is talk about different books I haven't talked about before. So I think I've largely managed to do that in this. So there are six main questions, and the seventh question is to tag some people. So we'll go through those. All of the questions, as you may have guessed from my intro, are based on musicals, on lyrics from famous songs from musicals. Troy, who's created the tag, as well as being a booktuber, is a playwright and also a novelist. So I'm not much into plays, but I do like novels, as you probably guessed. And I read Troy's novel The Forsaken Boy a while ago, which is a really good sort of coming of age werewolf novel. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Definitely recommend it if you like that kind of thing. Right, so let me get into the questions. As I say, six main questions. So the first question is, first prompt is, Fiddler on the Roof, if I were a rich man. I could try and sing these lyrics, couldn't I? Could I do Fiddler on the Roof? If I were a rich man. That's a bad idea, so I'm not going to do that for anymore. Recommend a book that takes place... no, sorry, that's the wrong prompt. God, this just is a complete disaster so far, this video. Okay, Fiddler on the Roof. If I were a rich man, recommend a book in which someone becomes very wealthy or very poor over the course of the story. So for this one, a book which I don't think I've mentioned on the channel before, but I have mentioned the author on the channel before. That is The Hustler by Walter Tevis. So Walter Tevis was a fantastic kind of mid-20th century author, kind of 50s, 60s, 70s. Who wrote a wide variety of different kinds of books. So he wrote some sci-fi and some stuff like The Hustler, which is more kind of in the crime vein, but it's not really crime. So The Hustler's about a guy, Fast Eddie, who's a pool player, like a hustler, funnily enough, who manages to make a load of money and then lose a load of money fairly early on in the book. And the rest of the book is about him trying to gain his confidence back again to try and win that money back. So a fantastic kind of... rags to riches to rags kind of a story. I won't let you know if he gets back to riches at the end again or not. Really an excellent book and thoroughly recommended. Right, question 2. Annie. The sun'll come out tomorrow. God, that was a bad idea as well, wasn't it? Recommend a book that takes place after the end of the world. So for this one, a book which I read a few years ago, which I thought was fantastic. I think there's 3 books in the series, and I've read the first 2, but definitely need to read the third one. That's the Book of the Unknown Midwife by Meg Ellison, which is a wonderfully dark but very thoughtful and interesting book about a future where, I'm trying to remember how it plays out. I think most of the women have died, and there are roving bands of aggressive men doing the kind of things that aggressive men do in post-apocalyptic societies. And the central character is a midwife who kind of travels around disguised as a man in order to help the few women that are left to have children safely and things like that. So a really interesting story, really touches sort of smartly on kind of gender issues and things like that, and also on issues of gender identity, but also a really well written and exciting and gripping and gruesome at times kind of post-apocalyptic story. Okay, question 3. I'm not going to sing this one. So question 3, Hamilton. I want to be in the room where it happens. Recommend a book in which a character is in a room where they shouldn't be at a key moment. So I'm going to cheat a bit with this one. And I'm going to talk about an author who I don't normally talk about on the channel, and that author is J.K. Rowling. So I don't normally talk about J.K. Rowling for two, well, maybe for one fairly obvious reason. So one is, she's a very problematic figure nowadays. I would, happily go on record to say I completely disagree with her views on transgender rights. I do, however, think she's a very good writer, and I have stopped reading her books. I was really enjoying the Strike series that she's published under the pseudonym Robert Galbraith, but I won't be reading those anymore because of my opposition to her thoughts and her actions in particular. But I do think she's a good writer, and I did read the Harry Potter books. And there's something she did, I think it's in the 4th Harry Potter book, The Order of the Phoenix, which I thought was absolutely incredible. So, all of the Harry Potter books, the vast majority of the action in the Harry Potter books, I think perhaps pretty much all of the action, certainly up until this point, revolves around Harry as a character. So he's in all of the scenes, and you always see, whilst the books are written in the third person, it's very much his take on the world, his reaction to the world. You see everything filtered through his character, which makes it feel safe. So even though there's horrible stuff going on, and there's clearly this backstory of destruction, if you like, and the death of his parents, he is as the central character, he makes it feel safe because it becomes a story about a young boy going to school, basically. But the beginning of the 4th book, you get to see a scene in which Harry doesn't, it begins with a scene in which Harry is not present at all, which is a really disturbing scene involving Voldemort and his gang taking over someone's house. And I found that when I read it an enormously powerful scene because of that fact that you've got so comfortable in the books because of Harry's continued presence, that as soon as this scene happens, it has enormous additional power because of the absence of Harry as a character to make the reader feel safe. So there we go. That's my slightly cheating answer to that one, because in this one I think it's more it's not so much the fact that there is a character present in the room who shouldn't be. It's that a character is absent from the story, but B, you as the reader are present in the room when you shouldn't be, and you shouldn't be there because Harry isn't there, and you should only be where Harry is in terms of kind of the internal logic of the books, if that makes sense. Right, next question then. Question 4 is Oklahoma. I can't quite remember the tune for Oklahoma, so I won't sing this one either, but it's Where the Wind Comes Sweeping Down the Plain. Recommend a book that makes very good use of its setting. So for this one I was going to go with a series of books. So obviously I'm a big fan of crime and detective fiction, and detective fiction and crime fiction often has, I think, an excellent sense of place, and often revolves around particular cities and locations. It's kind of a bit of a trope, really, particularly in modern crime fiction, that an author will pick a place or a city and write a series of books about a detective in that city. So the local example to me is the Roy Grace books by Peter James, which is set in Brighton, which is the nearest city to me. So the one I wanted to choose for this was the Rebus books by Ian Rankin, which are set in and around Edinburgh. So Edinburgh's a city I know reasonably well, having travelled up there a number of times in the past for work. And I think Rankin really does do a fantastic job of capturing the feel of the city, but also kind of transplanting that into Rebus's character. So Rebus is quite a dour character, and Edinburgh is at times a very wet and bleak city, but also it's a city full of culture, and Rebus is quite a cultured character as well. He's massively into music and things like that, and the music he listens to plays a big part in the stories. Also, clearly he is a big drinker, and drinking is a big part of the culture in Edinburgh. I believe certainly at one point, I don't know if it's still true, that the Grassmarket area of Edinburgh is one of the places, I think, in the world that has the highest concentration of pubs. So it feels like Rebus and Edinburgh very much go together in the Rebus books, and I think Rankin does a fantastic job of that. Okay, next one is from Phantom of the Opera. So I'm definitely not going to see this one. Turn your face away from the garish light of day. Recommend a book in which a character actively embraces the dark side of their personality. So anyone who watches the channel will know I talk a lot about books where a character actively embraces the dark side of their personality. It's kind of it's almost central to the channel, isn't it? Even when I'm talking about not non-disturbing books, they tend to be violent or dark books. So the one I wanted to pick for this is not a book I've really talked about on the channel before. I might have mentioned it a couple of times, but I think it's a fantastic example of this. And I think it's a fantastic example of this because the character, whilst they are embracing the darkness in their personality, they kind of don't realise they are. They are completely self-deluded about their actions and the harm that their actions have. And that book is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, which I think is clearly it's a book that has the reputation of being problematic. I'm not sure that it is problematic because I think Nabokov does such a good job of making it clear to the reader, even if it's not clear to the character, that that Humbert, the central character, is unspeakably evil, but so self-deluded that he doesn't realise that himself. So I think it's a really, really excellent book. Okay, question 6 then. Wicked. Should I do Wicked? It's from Defying Gravity. Can I do that? Something has changed within me. Something is not the same. God, that was really bad, wasn't it? That one might end up on the cutting room floor. Recommend a book you loved. It made you feel you could defy gravity. So this book, I'm pretty sure I haven't talked about on the channel before, because it's a children's book. And that book is Shh by Sally Grindle. So when my son was a lot younger, so he's in his teens now, when he was growing up for the first few years of his life, I would read to him every night. So we had a big stack of children's books, and as many parents do, that was kind of the nighttime routine. Was after supper and a bit of TV or whatever, we'd go upstairs, he'd get ready for bed, and I would sit by the side of his bed and read to him. And I read many, many books as part of that. One of them was this book, Shh, by Sally Grindle, which is a fantastic book, which is about a character. So it's a picture book, and it's about a character going into like a giant's castle. I can't remember if it's actually Jack and the Beanstalk or not, but it's a similar setup. So you follow this character going through the giant's castle. The giant is asleep, and the character is trying to get stuff and escape, basically. And there's a thing that the author does very cleverly where the pages of the book have a hole in them. So as you turn the pages, you can look back at what's happened before, to an extent. And it becomes a kind of part, very much a part of reading the story, particularly reading the story with a kid, is, you read what's on the page and then you turn that page and you look to see what you can see in the hole, basically. And it kind of, it's just fun. It's a fun part of the story. But there's one moment in the story when, and this is a spoiler, so apologies if you haven't read skip forward if you haven't read it and you think you're going to. There's a bit of the story where the giant wakes up, basically. And when you turn that page, rather than seeing what was on the previous page, which is what as a reader you expect to see, you see the giant. So it's like there's like a trick in the construction of the book. So you actually see the giant coming to get you. And it literally, the first time I read it, I literally gasped. It was a transcendently wonderful experience, something I completely didn't expect, especially didn't expect from a kid's book, that just completely took me away from the fact that I was even reading a book. It was such a wonderful surprise and such a wonderful experience that it was just joyous for both me and my son. We were both completely blown away by it. So yeah, a wonderful book. And if you've got small children, I definitely recommend it. Okay, so this is the final prompt now, which I think I will try and sing, which is where you choose some people to answer the questions. So share these questions with some other booktubers. So the movie or the musical is Grease, and the prompt is, "You're the one I want. You are the one I want. Ooh, ooh, ooh." God. This video may be the death of the channel. So I'm gonna name 3 people who I would be interested to see do this tag. Those people are Nakia from the channel Plot Twist. So Plot Twist is a channel that's largely about kind of fantasy, which isn't something I am necessarily that into anymore. I used to be really into fantasy books when I was a kid and a teenager. Not so much now, but I do enjoy hearing people talk about, you know, different kinds of books. And Plot Twist is a channel that does that well. So yeah, Nakia from Plot Twist, Lauren from Happy Haunts Library. So Lauren is as you can probably guess from the name of her channel, a horror booktuber, but focusing more, I would say, on kind of the lighter side, the kind of cozier side of horror to an extent, some darker stuff as well. But another excellent channel. And then also Andrew from It Came From The Page. So I think Andrew's channel might be my favourite channel on BookTube at the moment. I think his presentation is just so consistently entertaining. His cats play a big part in his videos, so if you like cats, definitely tune into his stuff. But he talks about, particularly about what I term, and he sometimes doesn't like me calling them this, but trashy books. So he talks a lot about like movie novelizations and things like that, but also kind of horror and sci-fi and sometimes fantasy more generally. But yeah, just a really entertaining channel, and he always has something really interesting to say about the books he's talking about as well. So yes, those are the people I choose. Okay, time for a random book from the shelf. So today, again, we have a book that's been chosen by one of my patrons. So one of the perks of the upper tiers of my Patreon is that you can pick a random book from the shelves for me to talk about. So today's was picked by patron Juan Morales, and the book is The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian, which is one of the Del Rey collections of Conan stories. So the Conan stories by Robert E. Howard rather than any of the later ones by other authors. So I think there's 3 volumes in this. This is the first volume. So you're probably familiar with the character of Conan, even if you don't know the stories, from the movies and things like that. But the stories by Robert E. Howard are fantastic. And whereas we think of Conan as Conan the Barbarian, we think of Conan in a very particular way because of the movies. In the stories, he's all sorts of different things. He ends up being a king. He's a thief. He's a trader. He plays all sorts of different roles, and different stories have him doing different things. And what's wonderful about the stories is they're not written chronologically. They kind of skip about around his life, so you never really know which version of Conan you're going to get next. But they are all identifiably the same person, just at different stages, in their life. So really, really interesting. The story in particular that Juan mentioned in this book is I'm now going to forget the name of it. The Queen of the Black Coast, which has Conan as a pirate, so kind of a seafarer sailing around doing piratey stuff. So a fantastic story, as they all are. But yeah, well worth reading Conan if you like a bit of kind of adventure-y type stuff. Not necessarily exactly what you'd expect from the movies. Okay, I hope you've recovered from my singing. I do apologise for that. I don't know what I was thinking. I've got a bit of a cold at the moment. I think it's affected my brain. So yeah, I hope you found it interesting anyway. Let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about. Let me know what your responses to the prompts might have been. And as always, thank you very much for watching. I hope you're safe and well out there. I hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.